dude, this is like the easiest way to make money. Like these people are literally coming to your site, clicking out your form and saying,
stealing candy from a baby.
Yeah, it's like, please take our money and help us.
Damn, that's the best problem to focus on ever. It's like, dude, there's all these girls who want to like talk to you at the bar. Like you're ignoring them somehow. I don't know how. What is up, everybody? This is Michael Sikand. I'm joined by my co-founder and co-host Simran Sandhu, and we're dishing up another episode of Our Future Podcast. This is the entrepreneurship podcast for young people. What we do is study the most successful up-and-coming young entrepreneurs who've raised a ton of money, who are crushing it in their various industries, and we take their tactics and strategies and help you kind of learn them so you can apply them to your own journey. So why should you listen to me and Simi? We sold our media business back last January to Morning Brew. Now we get to host this show and kind of dive into so many different kinds of businesses. We love doing this every week. And the past few episodes have been focused on just one founder. Now we're focusing on two in this episode. So you're going to get a window into not only the consumer-focused recruiting company, but also a SaaS business.
Yeah, and it's not just going to be an art. There is some level of a science in here. There's one common thread that connects both companies that we're going to talk about today. So we'll let you figure out what that pattern is going to be. But tell us a little bit about Michael Yan and the business that he started.
So Michael Yan teamed up with his co-founders. They're a mix of like Stanford and Berkeley guys. So we have Michael Yan, age 23, Rushil Srivastava, 21, and Ethan Horoschak, 23. So these guys started working on this business a couple years back, and it's called Simplify. So Simplify aims to be the ultimate AI co-pilot for your job search. So they have a vision to make it bigger than what it is today, but they have 400,000 people using a Chrome extension that removes the monotony from job search. And we all know how much that sucks. You know, when I was in college, I would apply to jobs and stuff. Simi, you've probably done it as well. Probably less so than people who didn't take the path of entrepreneurship, but it does blow. And they've made it blow just a little bit less with their Chrome extension. So they market themselves as the honey for job search. So Honey, the Chrome extension for shopping deals, which sold for $4 billion to PayPal. They're kind of modeling their company off of that. But yeah, the real kind of core use case is this free product. 400,000 people are using it, and it just auto-populates your work experience into these custom form fields that various companies have when collecting job applications. So I feel like they've solved a big pain point, and especially for Gen Z, right, which is struggling to get into the workforce right now. It's kind of a war of attrition in terms of job applications. You got to really mass apply. And what does our generation love? Tools that are very convenient and spending less time on the things they don't enjoy. So, they've definitely found a need for this product, and they're succeeding.
Yeah, dude. It's like most companies, right, that are actually successful, which is they just got the timing right, which was they started this business kind of in the heat of COVID. And that was like the big time where people were getting their internships taken away, right? Like they had that, sense of security, and it was like, boom, like big bang taking away, all the internships, all these big companies that traditionally you would never think, right, would like recall these jobs and these offers. And so that's when the company came out. And there were other kind of companies that rode this wave, right? Like Ladder. And that's probably one of the more popular ones on LinkedIn. I know Michael is quite a big influencer on LinkedIn. It looks like he has
massive.
like 100,000 followers, but it's all around this, like, hey, let's help you get a job. Here are some resources. We're going to compile these lists. And he's extended that into this Chrome extension. One other point I was going to bring up is that, dude, this is another one of those like Uber for X type models, which is like, we're building the honey for Y. Right. And I just think that's so funny. With any kind of Chrome extension, it's like we're doing the honey for Z, the honey for X. Right. Yeah. And it's like, when you have one player who's built the model and done it extremely well, that makes it great for all the other players to come. So, this one's interesting. Right. Because if you look at the framing for these kind of businesses, right, the argument Michael was making was that most people are coming at the recruiting angle to the employer side. So how can we get them the best candidates possible? But what Michael believes that they're doing with Simplify is that they're actually coming at it from the candidate's perspective, which is, hey, you as the candidate, how do we put you in the best position possible to get in front of the opportunities that you want? And so that has seemed to be a really compelling pitch, even with investors, people that have joined the team, and also the students that are using this extension and using their platform.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. It's Ecom 101 as fuck, right?
Yeah.
It's like supply's got to equal demand, right? They got to intersect at some point. Okay. This is your lesson today. And they're trying to make the recruiting market more efficient, right? They're trying to make these candidates more, presentable and relevant to the job postings, whilst everyone has been focused on, just sending as many leads as possible to, these large employers. So, the missing equation, in that market has been, let's get the candidates up to speed, right? Let's get the candidates more opportunities. So yeah, I mean, market efficiency is still really skewed. I feel like in the recruiting landscape, nobody's really put it together. So I like what Simplify is doing, and it's kind of a good story, right? It's like, we're like the champion for young people trying to get jobs. We're going to be, your friend. We're going to be your ally. And I have to say, is there an easier way to build an audience or community by just telling people they can get a job?
Yeah, it's like, hey, we will get you paid, right? Like, it's that same philosophy.
We will get you paid.
But, like most things, and it's similar in the way that dating works, which is typically the top 5% of candidates, the top 5% of, potential love interest, they seem to get 80% of the offers and the interest out there, right? So how do you kind of put everyone on the same, playing field? And that was kind of their own personal need that they identified, which is like, hey, we're young, ambitious freshmen. We want to get our own internships. But I don't know where to start. Like, how do you even draft a resume? And like, what are the kind of key things that you should be saying? And what are the tactics you should be taking to get in front of these recruiters? And like, what's too far? What's too close? All of that stuff, right? So what they're really trying to do is like build out this methodology, right? Which is like, here is how you can go about this process, and we're going to standardize it. We're going to help you build out these resumes. And, now there's all these AI tools involved, and they've kind of rode that wave. But, it's really just like, how do we make this a more seamless process for people who are looking for jobs?
Absolutely. You mentioned that the analogy he used was honey for why, right?
Yeah.
But he also mentioned wanting to be the common app of job search, right? Which I thought was super interesting. Common App is a funny little monopoly, right? It's it's the only kind of platform you can use to apply to these various colleges and universities. I believe 95% of American colleges and universities use the Common App. And, it's a huge business. I don't have particular revenue numbers to report, but I know that my sister just applied with the Common App to a bunch of schools, and it was $2,000 for 20 schools, right? It's like $100 a school. It's crazy.
Do you think it takes out the value of differentiation though? Like, if it's the same, we see this trend over and over. It's like the easier it is to do something, the less special it becomes. You know what I mean? For example, maybe the people who were differentiating themselves before were the ones who went out of their way to figure out how the game works, and they were coming at it with these really creative angles. You know what I mean? It's the same with cold emails. It's the same with all these different platforms. The easier something is, the less of an opportunity there's going to be.
Look, I love the analogy you're making with cold outreach sales. I think it's right on the money. But with the Common App, there's a base essay and a base prompts that all the schools agree to, but then there's supplementals where you have to tailor your messaging and story to that particular school.
Interesting.
The same as in with recruiting, right? Maybe they mostly have the same resume fields, but sometimes there's some different interesting little nuggets or an extra question in there that Netflix might ask but Microsoft doesn't. And Simplify will help you fill in that information quickly and kind of personalize yourself to that, right? So again, co-pilot for these kind of differing roles, and it will also tailor your resume towards each of these schools. Now, it would be cool to have that on the Common App.
Yeah.
If a certain school prioritize something over the other, right? So that's what I think is going on there.
Go a step further. What does that personalization layer look like in this business?
Yeah, so the personalization layer in Simplify is Okay. So have you heard of like when you're creating a resume and then people will like essentially match words in the job description and throw them into their resume? So there's kind of like hacks like that, right? Where, they'll be requesting this certain set of skills. And then I guess with Simplify, with their, AI play, it'll read what the job description is looking for and then tailor your experience to like match that in some way.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So to try and create the perfect match for you.
You know what's an interesting part is that he said most people apply to 200 jobs before they find, their role or opportunity. I feel like that's a lot. Like, I couldn't even imagine applying to 200 different jobs. Like, that's crazy.
I know, it's wild. I just think there's a great deal of burnout amongst our generation, especially, that makes a product like this just so useful, right? Because it can be just so not humiliating, but demoralizing just to throw your name in so many buckets and get nothing back, right? And it appears that the way these companies are doing it, and like, it's just like how the market is. You just gotta apply. You just gotta swipe on Tinder, man. You just gotta get through leads.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way. And to be honest, Simi, it's still that way in the sales world, right? It's still like a numbers game.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
In terms of like the calls and the emails and all that.
For sure. I mean, if you also look at like the AI thing again, he said something that was wild, which was close to 70% of people are now using AI to draft any and all their resumes. Like, dude,
that doesn't surprise me at all.
I'm not surprised, but it is like wild, right? Like, I think this is like some of the mini SaaS things that are going on right now in like the education space. Like, we've covered Kadama in the past, and like, Oliver has his like business around like Study Buddy and things like that. And I'm like, is this like a net positive or is this a negative for like these people? Because like it just like takes out having to do the work.
Well, yeah, I think I have a good point to reply to that, which is like, now I guess there's never been a better time to find the third door, right? Or have those in-person communication skills, or find those creative ways to stand out, right? So in a world where AI can do all this personalization for us, it can go out and apply to jobs for us, it can go out and try and create sales and opportunities for us. It'll make all the difference to bring that human touch when it matters, right? To find those creative opportunities, use your human intuition to find the back door, get in the room, talk to the person, right? I think people like that are going to be rewarded heavily in the age of AI, right? When there's just so many applicants and so much of the same, and it's all just so automated, right? Being able to creatively find your way into these rooms and build these relationships is going to go crazy. Right?
Yeah.
Because there's another way I'm thinking about Simplify. It's like, it may be of what you said, in that it starts really hot, like everybody uses this, and then the market becomes saturated. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, this might very well be an epic weapon for the first 1 million users, but past the 1 million mark, right? Companies are flooded with job applications like never before. Like, does the proliferation of Simplify actually hurt the market and the service overall? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important.
Just think about
it's important to think about that for sure, especially if you're like trying to build a business for the long term. It's like, hey, if everything becomes easier to do in this specific space, like what does happen to my business, 5 years from now, assuming like we achieve all the things we want to do?
Is it just going to make the problem worse, right? Could the platform success make their core problem they're trying to solve actually worse in the end?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
By creating even more of this mismatch between employers and applicants, and this massive en masse approach, which is just fire away.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Totally. It's interesting. I will say it seems like, something that's worth being very bullish on them is like they've defied the odds in a lot of ways. So, their investors, they're pitching this, and, taking into context, they've now raised over $3 million from like leading, venture firms, including Craft. The big question is like, why do you think you're going to succeed? When there's like a graveyard of companies that have tried to tackle this same problem and they haven't. And like, honestly, you may be facing that question if you're listening to this, maybe you're pitching investors. the simple answer is quite literally, we face this problem and we're building the solution for what we would have wanted at that point in time. And I love that answer because it's so simple. I personally would have never thought of it. I would have tried to find some complex answer about the gap in the market and like, this is how we're strategically positioned to take this on. But like, it's like, no, at the end of the day, it was a personal need. And so I'm just going to build for me.
Yeah.
And like that to this day still proves as the most effective way to pitch your product to investors, to customers, to potential employees and people who join your team. And, just kind of a golden nugget that I took away from our combo.
It is a gold nugget. It's also kind of a cheat code when talking to like boomer investors, old dudes. It's like, listen, it's a Gen Z thing. All right. You're not going to get it. And they're like, oh, fuck. Like, okay, yes. That does sound like a Gen Z thing. And it is, right?
Yeah.
This problem with applying to jobs is definitely a very Gen Z problem.
I will say building via a Chrome extension, like in the first iteration of your business, is such a great way to do it. Like there's so much value in a Chrome extensions. Yeah. Like if you've never built a business before, I would say like that's probably a great place to cut your teeth.
Yeah, for sure. And what these guys have done super well is they haven't spent a cent on marketing. They've only raised $3 million, but none of that. It's all gone to product, which is really, what's going to matter here.
Yeah.
Because they've already figured out the marketing funnel, right? They have great TikTok content. Their LinkedIn content absolutely blows up. And they employed the same content strategy at Ladder, which was we're publishing a new guide of 1,000 startups looking for students, right? It's all this kind of very like comment your email bait that still works on LinkedIn. Crazy.
How do you think about the churn for this business? Because if you think about it, like in the ideal outcome, you get a job from this platform and then you never use it, right? Like it's built in a way that actually in a successful use case, you're actually not staying on the platform. It's like you find your role, you successfully apply, you get the job, now you're off. How do you think they think about that?
Yeah, I think churn is a problem, especially like you described it as like dating apps. Like, you get coupled up and you dip out. I would honestly lean into Hinges marketing, which is the dating app meant to be deleted. I feel like that really would resonate with our generation. And that's why I feel like Hinge is winning the battle over Tinder and maybe Bumble and some of these other apps. Is I feel like that messaging is really, really hits home.
Yeah.
So then your thing is, okay, let's just bring in the next generation. So let's get these college kids into entry-level jobs. They're going to have a experience on their resume and boom, they can go into the next thing. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
So it's going to be like a mini university, and that you spit out, you spit in, or a frat, right? New guys, old guys, just constantly.
Well, it's
fresh blood.
I think it's a cool business, and like seriously rooting for these guys to succeed, because I think if they pull it off, like not only are they going to make a lot of impact, but they'll make a lot of money doing it. Definitely rooting for them. But let's go ahead and move on to our next story. So the common thread here is that this next business was also funded by Craft Ventures, and it was started by my good friend Nico Ferreya and his co-founder Victor Papyshev. So these guys started it 2 or 3 years ago, but essentially it is an inbound go-to-market workflow. They've raised over $6 million from, like I said, Craft, 8VC, Jock Altman, Box Group, Go-to-Market Fund, all of the big players. I mean, what I think is cool about this is like they're stacked, man. Like they did such a good job about bringing elite investors and elite talent on the board. And what Nico told me is like it took them over 2 years to build out the tech and build out the platform before they even launched. They've just recently gone to market, and it seems like they're doing really, really well from what I can tell.
Yeah, man. I feel like the way to win in B2B SaaS right now is, and especially in sales and marketing tools, is you have to essentially destroy like 5 other tools at once.
Yes.
So
yes,
with this like zero interest rate phenomenon, there's just so much proliferation in tech software companies and software sales companies and whatever. So now the tech stack is so bloated, right? With what Nico has done is he's really kind of consolidated Zapier, Calendly, Chili Piper, all into one platform. And I feel like particularly as the market turns and people want to spend less on expensive software subscriptions, he's in a great position. And at the end of the day, he built a great product which is why it took 2 years. But I feel like he's really seizing the moment, because now, as people are fatigued with all this stuff and this tech stack, he's really slimmed it down, and it's very simple.
I think you're right. It has to be all in one for this to work. And so it's like, let's take all of the other softwares that you'd have to use. Probably the spend is crazy, right? Like, these softwares are not cheap. And so if you can just make it full suite where it's like, hey, we're going to do lead qualification, we're going to do all the scheduling, we're going to do all the routing. Like, that's a good place to be. I think another genius part about this business is they chose the right side of the playing field. So instead of being on outbound, which, like, you know, I'm not generally optimistic on, they went inbound. And that's such a smarter place to be, because they're not in charge of having to go find leads for you. It's quite literally, the leads are going to come in. Let's just make sure you actually go convert them. And, you know, that's not something you now have to be responsible for. It's like, let's just make sure we're capturing them and doing right from that standpoint. So I think for that specific reason, it's a much smarter business.
For sure. I mean, let's just walk people through what it is. So you arrive on the website, and so a lot of people in a rudimentary form like us on our website, we have like a click to book and it opens a Calendly integration on our website. What this does is a little more advanced. It allows, so you go, it's, you know, a nice button, you click it, you enter information, you can customize that form as the business. So you can qualify the lead. Based on how qualified the lead is, you can then send them to a specific sales rep, and then there's the calendar integration for booking the actual demo. So it's just a more efficient, I think of it as a sales dispatcher. I feel like that's like the most basic way to put it. And it feels like, again, an amalgamation of a bunch of different tools that people use. So Nico made this LinkedIn post that I thought illuminated a lot of the value customers see in his business. He said, we recently talked to a 1,500 person company with 500 sales reps. They're doing 250 million in ARR, but they had a really expensive problem. They're currently paying over $600 per rep on SaaS products every single month. So their number one priority for 2024 was consolidating their revenue stack. So they mentioned their lead, contact, account, opportunity routing is living in 5 different systems. So that's what Default does. It brings it all into one. And he was just brainstorming like the opportunity for his business. And he's like, essentially estimated there's $3 billion in bloated software spend at the moment.
It's insane.
And it also speaks to what Chamath was talking about. He's like, look, software's too expensive. Like, tell me what software you like and we'll just build it for cheap.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we talked about on the last 2 episodes ago or whatever.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that part is hard to do. I don't think you can just like replicate every single software with like overseas developers in the way Chamath says. But I do find a few things really interesting about this business. And I think it's how Nico thinks about it. So in the conversation I had with him, he brought up some interesting points, which is when you're building software, you want to build across spiky problems. So like, for example, rippling targeted HR, right? Like that's a spiky problem versus like, say, collaboration tools, because those aren't necessarily as spiky. I mean, they're valuable because they spread across several different functions. And so that was a new way to think about software in that I haven't previously been exposed to, which is like, understand, like, is this something that like is a big enough problem like that you can tackle head on, or are you trying to focus across several different functions and your hope is that like, you know, several teams use something like this? And we can talk about like what those examples are, but what do you think about that?
Do I consider what he built to be a super spiky problem? I don't know. I mean, was it really hard for companies to route different salespeople to specific leads before? I guess it was more manual.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. So I was watching an interview with the CEO of Apollo, and I forget the exact statistics, but I think it was like more than 70% of people just fumble the bag when it comes to inbound leads. Like people don't hit them back up. Like they just forget to follow up with them. And I was like, dude, this is like the easiest way to make money. Like these people are literally coming to your site, clicking out your form and saying,
stealing candy from a baby.
Yeah, it's like, please take our
baby.
money and help us, right? And like, there's a vast majority of companies don't get that right. And so apparently it's a much bigger problem than like most people would think.
Damn, that's the best problem to focus on ever. It's like, dude, there's all these girls who want to like talk to you at the bar. Like you're ignoring them somehow. I don't know how.
It's like, no, we're too cool. I'd rather just send out outbound and send thousands of emails to people who may or may not want this.
Yeah, it's like, you're really, really cool, but like you need to go out and talk to people. Like it's almost like telling a company that like, you know, they're missing out, right, on potential revenue, which is what every sales and SaaS company does. But this is the most qualified of that lost revenue.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about leaky funnels in this, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, just sending the wrong rep, because like the way I think about it is I think like these software companies will send less qualified sales opportunities to like the new guys, and they'll send the more qualified ones to like the more established reps. Is that how things work?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So it's like they've essentially like optimized for every single lead that can possibly come in. Yeah. And so that's where like, you know, you're 2 years heads down in development. Dude, I think that feels like a long time in general. It's just like, we're going to make sure this is like the best damn platform that these companies will see in the market. Maybe you have to think about it that way. Like that brings up an interesting point with it, which is like when a market and industry is saturated, you can't afford to bring a shitty product into market. Like you can't just bring a trash MVP and assume that people are going to use this. Like it has to be better than any existing alternative that currently exists.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. Sales and marketing tools is such a crowded industry. It's so competitive. It's so cutthroat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you've really got to take a big swing. And when I say big swing, I mean cast a big net and really just rope in all these tools into like one solution. I think when you're in sales, you're just trying to make money. You're just trying to convert leads. You're trying to grow revenue. Dealing with all these different platforms and having your head in 5 different places is in itself a problem, is in itself a distraction towards the core mission of the company. So I'm really impressed by what Nico's been able to build. The website's beautiful, and he's really tapped into like the no code world, right? Like you can set up these funnels, just drag and drop.
It's all automations. Yeah.
I think functionality like that is really important. I think what I've noticed when I was looking at Default is he's taken the best parts of all these darling businesses like Klaviyo, like Calendly, you know, and he's just taken their functionality and combined it into like something that does it all. It makes me think of the consolidation in the software industry you talked about before.
Yeah.
Not only are we seeing consolidation on an M&A level, we're seeing feature consolidation across all businesses, right? Where they kind of want to be much more full stack, and they want companies in general. The way that it's moving is companies just want to use less software in general.
Yeah. You know, something else that sticks out to me is that, you know, when you look at a space that you're interested in, it should all be guided by a fundamental question of some kind. So, for example, when Nico was thinking about this concept, right, he's like evaluating the entire sales and marketing landscape. The big question that he was bringing, you know, to his co-founders, early members of the team was, do we believe that another $10 billion business could be started in the sales and marketing space? And the entire business started from that question, right? And if the answer is yes, if you fundamentally believe that, okay, well, what needs to be true for that to happen? Right. And so it's very like top down in that approach. And, you know, it reminds me of when we had covered Carrot, the credit card company. And those guys also thought about raising, you know, additional rounds with a guiding question of some sort. It's like, hey, if we raise $3 million, what is the question we're trying to solve? And if we answer that question, well, what's the next question that we have to figure out? And so time and time again, I come back to this realization that the best sales pitches, the best companies that are built are all built off of, a question, right? Because if, say I'm trying to pitch you, I'm like, hey, Michael, I'm building this company in the sales and marketing space. And I ask you this question and you say no. Well, then I know it's not worth my time it's not worth me wasting my time with you. It's like, you don't even fundamentally believe the core question that I'm trying to answer or try to solve. So it's a great way to like filter it out, make sure like you have believers in what you're doing. One other thing I think worth mentioning in this is when you're trying to sell your product or service in the early days, right? You're going to get some interest from people who find your platform interesting. Maybe you get that big TechCrunch article that just, says, hey, you're fresh off of this hot funding. You got all the big investors in the space. So some people may, come knocking on your door and saying, hey, what's going on at Default? What's so interesting about you guys? And one thing that I found really interesting about how Nico pitches this, which is he actually downplays the capabilities that they're actually seeking out, right? So they'll come to him and they'll be like, hey, can you do this? Hey, can you do that? Well, Nico knows that Chili Piper can do all of those features, right? So he downplays it when he's selling it. It's like, of course we do all of those features that you're asking for. Like, of course we already do what all the existing alternatives in the market do. But we also do this, and we also do, Y and Z. And that's something no one else does in the market. And that is like the most effective sales tactic he's had while building this business. And I thought that was great.
Yeah, that's a great psychology play, right?
Yeah.
Like he's essentially saying that you have he's essentially not highlighting his core features and only highlighting those special features of his platform because he's like, you should assume that we do all that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's also just like if you look at it from, the person who's being sold, right? Like the customer or the prospect's perspective. It's like, to your point, changing their entire psychology. It's like, wow, maybe like what we're asking for isn't like that's not that much. Like that's actually not that cool. Like what else can you do for us? Like what other problems can you solve?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a little bit like just messing with their head. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just playing with your prospects, man. Making them want it. You got to make them want it more. Why do I feel like why are both the businesses we talked about so related to dating, bro? I just feel like
that's so funny.
Dude, it's funny. The first business we talked about was all cold. Like, send as much as you can out. And this one is just like, for those things that are coming to you, make sure you maximize and get them dialed in.
Yeah, for sure. That wraps up another episode of Our Future Podcast. Guys, if you have any feedback for us at all, please let us know. We're waiting with open ears over here. And if you don't, please, give us a like or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast and on our YouTube as well. So, guys, we will catch you next week for another episode of Our Future Podcast. Stay frosty.
Open ears. Stay frosty.